A few years ago, I genuinely believed I was doing well financially because my income was growing and my lifestyle looked better. I had upgraded my car, bought nicer clothes, and slowly started living the kind of life I once thought meant success. From the outside, everything seemed to signal progress. And if you saw me back then, you might have thought the same thing. But one night, I opened my bank account after paying bills, and something felt deeply wrong in a way I couldn't ignore. The number wasn't terrible, but it also wasn't moving forward the way I expected after months of working hard. And that was the moment I realized something uncomfortable that completely changed how I think about money and success. I wasn't actually getting richer over time. I was just getting better at looking like I was doing well financially. If you've ever felt like you earn decent money but still feel stuck, this might hit closer to home than expected. Because this isn't about how much you make, it's about what your money is actually doing behind the scenes. Before we go deeper, if you care about building real financial freedom instead of just appearing successful, consider subscribing here. I share the kind of lessons I wish someone had explained to me earlier, before I wasted years chasing the wrong signals. And if anything in this video feels familiar, leave a comment, because I read them and they help shape future videos. Now here's something that surprised me when I started digging into real data about personal finances in the United States. As of 2024, total credit card debt in America has passed approximately $1.13 trillion, according to Federal Reserve data. That number alone doesn't mean much until you realize how many people are quietly carrying balances month after month. At the same time, around 60% of Americans report living paycheck to paycheck, even among those earning relatively high incomes. That means more than half of people are one unexpected expense away from financial stress, regardless of how successful they appear. So the real question becomes, what if the issue isn't income, but the way we're using money to signal success instead? We live in a time where looking wealthy is easier than ever, because almost everything can be financed, filtered, and presented online. And the more convincing that image becomes, the harder it is to notice whether real financial progress is actually happening underneath. And here's the dangerous part. The better you get at looking successful, the easier it becomes to ignore what's actually happening financially. Because on the surface, everything feels fine, your lifestyle improves, people compliment you, and you start believing the image yourself. But behind that image, something very different might be happening. Your money stops building and starts maintaining appearances instead. Let me show you what I mean. With a simple example that reflects how many people in the United States live today. Imagine two people both earning around $80,000 a year, living in similar cities, with similar opportunities and expenses. The first person upgrades their lifestyle quickly. Nicer apartment, new car payments, more dining out, and regular spending to feel successful. The second person keeps their lifestyle stable and invests $500 every single month into long-term assets consistently. Over time, the first person looks more successful. Better car, better photos, better lifestyle, but their net worth barely grows. Meanwhile, the second person might look average from the outside, but their investments quietly begin to compound year after year. At an average return of around 7 to 8% annually, that $500 monthly can grow significantly over time. After 20 years, that consistent investment could reach roughly $300,000 or more, depending on market conditions. And the difference between those two people wasn't intelligence, luck, or income. It was simply how they chose to use money. One optimized for looking successful today, while the other optimized for becoming financially free in the future. And once I understood this, I started noticing patterns everywhere. Subtle behaviors that reveal whether someone is building or performing wealth. These patterns are not obvious at first, but once you see them, you can't unsee them in everyday situations anymore. More importantly, you start recognizing these behaviors in yourself, which is honestly where the real change begins. So in this video, I want to walk you through 10 specific patterns I've observed and honestly struggled with personally at times. Not to judge anyone, but to help you see clearly what might be quietly holding you back without realizing it. Because fake wealth doesn't just look misleading, it actively prevents you from building something real underneath the surface. And once you understand these patterns, you can start making decisions that actually move your life forward instead of sideways. Koibori. The first sign is something I personally fell into without realizing it at the time, buying status instead of actual value. This usually starts subtly. You don't think you're showing off. You just want something that feels like an upgrade. Maybe it's a luxury brand, a nicer car, or something with a recognizable logo that signals success to others. And there's nothing wrong with wanting nice things, but the problem is when the logo matters more than the function. I remember choosing something more expensive simply because of how it would look, not because it truly improved my life. Ikunt. That decision felt small at the time, but it revealed a deeper pattern in how I was thinking about money. When you buy status, you're not optimizing for usefulness. You're optimizing for how other people perceive your choices. And that often leads to paying a premium for something that delivers less real value than a cheaper alternative. For example, a base model luxury car can cost the same as a fully equipped, reliable vehicle from another brand. But the total cost doesn't stop at the purchase price. It includes insurance, maintenance, and long-term depreciation. Many of these vehicles lose 40 to 50% of their value within the first 5 years of ownership. So you're effectively paying thousands of dollars to maintain an image that disappears faster than you expect. And the uncomfortable truth is, most people aren't impressed as much as you think. They're focused on their own lives. What you're really buying in that moment isn't performance or comfort. It's validation from people who quickly move on. And that's why this pattern is dangerous, because validation feels good immediately, but it doesn't build anything long-term. Dekorgi. You're not buying value in those moments, you're buying approval, and approval doesn't compound over time. The second sign is more subtle but just as revealing, constantly talking about money instead of actually building it. You'll notice this in conversations where everything somehow circles back to deals, income, or future opportunities. I've done this myself before, mentioning plans or ideas that hadn't actually produced results yet, but sounded impressive. And the reason this happens is because talking about future money feels safer than facing your current financial reality. Kuznad. It feels productive to talk about what you're going to make, but nothing actually changes until money hits your account. Deals fall through, investments fluctuate, and opportunities disappear. But the image of success stays alive in conversation. That's why future money is so seductive. It lets you feel successful today without doing the hard work required. But real wealth is always measured in results, not intentions, not projections, and definitely not conversations. And when you rely on talking instead of building, you slowly disconnect your identity from your actual financial reality. Korids. You start believing you're further ahead than you are, which makes it even harder to correct your direction later. The people who are truly secure financially rarely need to explain how well they're doing to anyone else, because their confidence comes from what they've already built, not from what they hope will happen next. And once I noticed that difference, I started paying more attention to results instead of narratives. The third sign is one of the most dangerous, because it looks normal in everyday life, but creates serious long-term damage. Yurbi Karid. This is when one purchase represents a significant portion of your income, sometimes even multiple months of earnings. It might be a designer item, a watch, or something expensive that feels like a reward for your hard work. In that moment, it feels justified. You tell yourself you deserve it, especially after working consistently for months. But the real question isn't whether you deserve it. It's whether your financial system can safely support it. When one purchase can disrupt your savings, delay your goals, or create stress, it's a signal you're overextending. Used you. Financially stable people don't just look at price. They look at proportion relative to their income and net worth. A useful guideline is keeping major purchases within a small percentage of your annual income, not several months of it. Because when a single item represents months of your time, you're trading long-term security for short-term satisfaction. And that trade might feel invisible today, but it compounds quietly into missed opportunities over many years. If one purchase can set you back significantly, it's not a reward, it's a risk disguised as a celebration. Tweebeats. The fourth sign is something that almost everyone experiences at some point. Your lifestyle starts growing faster than your actual wealth. At first, it feels like progress. You earn more money. So naturally, you allow yourself to spend a little more comfortably. Maybe you move into a nicer place, upgrade your car, or start spending more on convenience and experiences. None of these decisions feel wrong individually, but together they create a pattern that quietly limits your financial growth. Because every increase in income gets absorbed into a higher cost of living instead of building long-term assets. This is known as lifestyle inflation, and it's one of the biggest reasons people never feel financially ahead. You earn more, but you also spend more, so your financial position doesn't actually improve over time. And the dangerous part is, this feels normal because everyone around you is doing the exact same thing. But if your lifestyle rises at the same speed as your income, your future remains exactly where it was before. Your income increased, but your freedom didn't, and that's a difference most people don't notice early enough. Doric, the fifth sign, is something that feels subtle but has a powerful effect on your decisions, needing other people to see it. This shows up in small ways: posting purchases, sharing upgrades, or highlighting moments that signal progress to others. And again, there's nothing wrong with sharing your life, but it becomes a problem when visibility drives your decisions. When you start asking yourself whether something is worth buying based on how it will look to other people. Social media amplifies this behavior, because attention and validation are rewarded more than discipline and long-term thinking. A $1,000 shopping trip gets more attention than quietly saving or investing that same amount for the future. And over time, this creates a loop where spending becomes tied to recognition instead of personal value. You begin making financial decisions not for yourself, but for how they will be perceived by others around you. And the question you rarely ask in those moments is simple: would I still want this if nobody ever saw it? Because if the answer is no, then you're not building wealth, you're performing it for an audience that moves on quickly. Poikios, the sixth sign, is one of the most normalized yet most damaging patterns, financing your lifestyle instead of actually affording it. This often shows up through credit cards, monthly payments, or leasing things that feel affordable but aren't truly owned. The payment feels manageable, so the decision seems reasonable, especially when everything is broken into smaller monthly amounts. But what's hidden underneath is the actual cost, which becomes significantly higher once interest and fees are included. In the United States, average credit card interest rates are often around 20% or even higher annually. That means if you carry a balance, you're paying a premium just to maintain purchases that are already losing value. So instead of your money working for you, you're working to pay for money you already spent in the past. Leasing works in a similar way. You get access to something expensive, but you never actually build ownership over time. You're essentially paying for the fastest period of depreciation, then returning the asset and starting the cycle again. Over 10 or 20 years, this can add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars spent with nothing owned at the end. Dar. And the trap is subtle, because everything feels affordable month to month, even though it's expensive long term. You're not building assets in that system. You're maintaining an image that resets itself every few years. The seventh sign is something I see constantly now: chasing every new opportunity instead of committing to one path. It starts with excitement. You discover something new, maybe trading, crypto, or a business model that promises fast results. You go all in, invest time, energy, sometimes money, and for a moment, it feels like this could finally work. But when results don't come quickly enough, attention shifts to the next opportunity that feels just as promising, and this cycle repeats. New idea, new effort, then abandonment before anything meaningful has time to grow. The underlying issue isn't the opportunity itself, it's the inability to stay consistent long enough to see real results. Because wealth, in most cases, comes from compounding over time, not from constantly restarting at zero. When you keep chasing something new, you stay busy, but you never actually move forward in a meaningful way. Terduridreit, the eighth sign, is something that feels almost invisible, constantly comparing your life to other people around you. This doesn't always feel negative at first. Sometimes it even feels motivating when you see others doing better. But over time, comparison quietly shifts your standards away from your own goals towards someone else's version of success. You start measuring your progress based on what others have, instead of what actually matters for your own life. And that changes your decisions in subtle ways, influencing what you buy, how you spend, and what you prioritize. Door. Social media amplifies this even more, because you're comparing your real life to someone else's curated highlights. You don't see their debt, their stress, or the trade-offs behind what they choose to show publicly. But your brain fills in the gaps, assuming their situation is better, more stable, or more successful than yours. And that assumption pushes you to spend money trying to close a gap that might not even be real. You end up playing a financial game that isn't yours, chasing a version of success that doesn't fit your reality. Torque. The ninth sign is more subtle, but once you notice it, it changes how you listen to people talking about money. This is when someone gives strong financial advice, even though their own results don't actually support what they're saying. I've done this myself before, repeating ideas that sounded smart without having real experience backing them up. And the reason this happens is not always arrogance. It's often a need to feel certain about your own decisions. When you give advice, you reinforce your identity, even if that identity hasn't been proven by real outcomes yet. But the problem is, confidence without results can keep you locked into strategies that aren't actually working. Instead of questioning your approach, you defend it, because admitting uncertainty feels uncomfortable and difficult. And over time, this prevents growth, because you're protecting your ego instead of improving your financial decisions. Truly knowledgeable people tend to speak more carefully, because they understand how much they still don't know. But when someone speaks with certainty without results, they're often trying to convince themselves more than anyone else. The 10th and final sign is something you feel more than you see, constantly being exhausted from maintaining the image. On the surface, everything looks fine, but underneath, there's pressure to keep up with the lifestyle you've created. You can't slow down spending because your image depends on consistency, and any step back feels like failure. So you keep going, upgrading, maintaining, repeating, even when it starts to feel financially and mentally draining. And over time, this creates a hidden stress that most people don't talk about openly, but many quietly experience. Because fake wealth isn't just expensive financially, it's exhausting psychologically when your identity depends on maintaining it. You're not just managing money anymore, you're managing perception, expectations, and the pressure to stay consistent externally. And that's when I realized something that completely shifted how I think about success and financial decisions. Real wealth doesn't demand constant attention. It doesn't require you to prove anything to anyone on a daily basis. Fake wealth, on the other hand, requires continuous effort just to maintain the appearance that everything is going well. So I started asking myself a different question. Not what looks successful, but what actually builds freedom over time. Because at the end of the day, the goal isn't to impress people for a moment. It's to create options for your future. Let me show you something simple but powerful that helped me understand how small decisions compound into massive differences. Imagine investing $500 every month into a diversified portfolio with an average annual return of 8%. Over 20 years, that consistent habit could grow to approximately $350,000 or even more. That number isn't based on luck. It's based on time, discipline, and letting compounding do its work quietly. Now imagine redirecting the same $500 toward maintaining a lifestyle that needs constant upgrading instead. One path builds something real over time, while the other slowly drains your future without you noticing immediately. And most people don't fail financially because they don't earn enough. They fail because they spend like they already made it. That realization was uncomfortable for me, but it was also the turning point that changed how I approached money completely. I've been in that position before, thinking I was moving forward while actually standing still financially without realizing it. And if I'm being honest, part of me knew something wasn't right, but I didn't want to confront it directly, because it's easier to believe you're progressing than to admit you might be optimizing for the wrong things entirely. But once you see these patterns clearly, it becomes very difficult to ignore them in your own decisions going forward. You start questioning purchases, habits, and even motivations behind why you want certain things in the first place. And that awareness alone can change the trajectory of your financial life more than any single strategy ever could. So here's a simple but important question I want you to think about honestly after watching this entire video. Are you building wealth in a way that gives you freedom? Or are you performing a version of success for others? Because those two paths might look similar at the beginning, but they lead to completely different outcomes over time. One gives you options, flexibility, and peace of mind, while the other creates pressure that never really goes away. 14. Real wealth is quiet. It doesn't need attention, validation, or constant upgrades to prove that it exists. Fake wealth is loud. It demands attention, and it constantly needs reinforcement just to maintain the illusion. The goal isn't to look rich for a moment, it's to actually become financially secure for the long term. And that shift in thinking might not feel exciting at first, but it's what separates temporary appearance from real progress. If this video made you rethink even one habit, take that seriously, because small changes compound into massive results. I'd love to know your perspective. Comment 1 if this resonated, or 0 if you see things differently. Your feedback genuinely helps me understand what you're going through and what topics would actually help you most. And if you want to keep learning how money really works beyond surface-level advice, consider subscribing to the channel. I'm here to share what actually matters, not just what looks impressive, so you can make smarter decisions moving forward. Because in the end, it's not about appearing successful to others, it's about building a life that actually works for you. Team 2.